The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a sea of white orchids and $500 a plate steaks. My stepfather, Justin Bonling, stood at the head table, tapping his crystal flute. The room went silent. He didn't look at the bride, my sister Chloe. He looked directly at me with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "To my stepdaughter Miley," he boomed, his voice dripping with mock pity. "May she one day find a man who overlooks her unfortunate professional failures, just as we have overlooked her presence here today." The room shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't just toasting, he was marking his territory. He wanted everyone to know I was the black sheep, the failure, the girl who couldn't keep her life together. But as he raised his glass, I felt a strange sense of calm. He thought he was burying me, but he was actually digging his own grave. The public humiliation was the final spark I needed. He had spent years making me look like a disaster to cover up his own rot. I watched the bubbles rise in his champagne, knowing that in less than an hour, that expensive liquid would taste like ash in his mouth. The countdown had officially begun. My name is Miley Finn. I am 29 years old, and I am a forensic structural engineer. To the 300 elites in this room, I was the troubled daughter who lost her firm's license and brought shame to the family name. What they didn't know, and what Justin Bonling had spent millions of dollars to hide, was that my firm didn't actually fail because of my mistakes. I had found the stress fractures in Justin's offshore construction accounts. I had discovered that the very buildings he claimed were icons of safety were actually ticking time bombs. He didn't just want me quiet. He wanted me socially dead, so that if I ever spoke the truth, no one would believe a word I said. I sat there, smoothed my dress, and looked at my watch. It was exactly 1:15 p.m. Justin was basking in the glow of the spotlight, unaware that I had spent the last 6 months playing the role of the failure just to get close enough to pull the rug out from under him. I wasn't just an engineer of buildings anymore. I was the engineer of his total and complete downfall. The truth was about to come out. Chloe squeezed my hand under the table, her bridal glow flickering with worry. "Don't, Miley. Not today," she whispered. She looked beautiful in her silk gown, but her eyes were filled with a fear she couldn't quite hide. She thought she was marrying into safety. She thought Justin was the noble benefactor who saved our family after our father's accidental drowning 10 years ago. She didn't know she was being used as a human shield to keep me from speaking. Justin had told her that I was mentally unstable and that my accusations were just a side effect of grief. He used her love for me to manipulate me into silence for years. Every time I tried to show her the truth, he would threaten to cut her off or ruin her wedding. Today was supposed to be her happiest day, and it broke my heart that it had to be the day the world changed for her. But I knew that living a lie in a house built on blood was worse than the temporary pain of the truth. I looked at her and forced a small smile, even though my heart was breaking for what was coming. Justin resumed his speech, pivoting to his philanthropy and his great contributions to the city's skyline. But I wasn't listening to his lies. I was looking at the digital watch hidden inside my bouquet of lilies. 1:45 p.m. The FBI warrant was being signed at the federal building exactly 6 blocks away. I just had to survive 30 more minutes of his arrogance and the judgmental whispers of the guests. I could hear the ladies at the next table whispering about my breakdown last year. They didn't know that breakdown was actually me being drugged and framed by Justin's henchmen. I kept my breathing steady. I had calculated every move like a blueprint. The structural integrity of Justin's life was failing, and I was the only one who could see the cracks spreading across the foundation. He kept talking about building a legacy, but all I could see were the ghosts of the people he had stepped on to get to that podium. I reached into my clutch and felt the cool plastic of the backup drive. Everything was in place. The ticking clock in my head was louder than the music of the string quartet playing in the corner. "And as a wedding gift," Justin announced, gesturing to a massive projector screen that lowered from the ceiling, "a tribute to the Bonling legacy and the bright future of this beautiful couple." A montage of his luxury developments began to play, showing gleaming glass towers and happy families. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I had swapped the thumb drive an hour ago, while the catering staff was busy setting up the cake. I knew the AV technician was a young kid who wouldn't double-check the files if I told him it was a surprise for the bride. Justin stood there with his chest puffed out, waiting for the applause. He loved the camera. He loved the power. He thought this video would cement his status as a king. He didn't realize that I had edited the footage to show the real story behind the glass and steel. He was about to give the most important presentation of his life, and he hadn't even seen the slides. The room went dark, and the music swelled into a triumphant theme that felt incredibly out of place for what was about to happen. Instead of luxury condos and smiling tenants, the screen suddenly flashed a grainy black and white photo of a shipping manifest. It was dated 5 years ago. It showed the substandard, cheap steel Justin had ordered for the Bayside Towers project, the same project that had collapsed 3 years ago, killing 6 innocent workers. The room gasped. The music continued to play its happy tune, making the images of the twisted metal and the grieving families look even more horrific. I saw Justin's smile falter for a split second, but he kept his composure. He was a professional liar, after all. He probably thought it was just a mistake by the media team. But then the screen showed his private emails, where he explicitly told the inspectors to look the other way, in exchange for a hefty bank transfer to an offshore account. The gasps turned into hushed, frantic whispers. People started looking at each other, then at Justin, then back at the screen. The perfect legacy was starting to crumble right in front of their eyes. I sat perfectly still, my eyes locked on the screen, feeling the weight of 3 years of silence finally lifting off my shoulders. Justin didn't blink. He laughed it off with a loud, boisterous sound that echoed through the ballroom. A technical glitch. Miley, I suppose your expertise extends to hacking now? Truly desperate and pathetic, he said, looking directly at me. The guests chuckled nervously, wanting to believe him. He was a pillar of the community, and I was just the unstable stepdaughter. He was winning them back with his sheer confidence. We all know Miley has struggled with reality since her firm went under, he continued, shaking his head with fake sadness. It's a shame she's chosen her sister's wedding to have another episode. I could see the doubt creeping back into the eyes of the guests. He was too powerful to be taken down by a simple slideshow. He had spent a lifetime building a fortress of lies, and he thought a few pictures wouldn't be enough to break through. He signaled for the AV tech to turn it off, but the screen stayed lit. I had made sure the file was looped and locked with a password he didn't have. He was stuck in the spotlight with his crimes on full display. I stood up slowly. My heart was a drum beating against my ribs, but my voice was steady. It's not a glitch, Justin. It's a ledger, I told him. I pulled a small remote from my clutch that I had synced to the system. The screen changed from emails to a series of insurance payouts for buildings that hadn't even burned yet. These are pre-filed claims for properties you plan to sabotage for the insurance money, I explained to the room. I pointed to the dates. They were all set for the upcoming fiscal year. The silence in the room became heavy and suffocating. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a storm hits. I could see the sweat starting to bead on Justin's forehead. He realized this wasn't just a random collection of photos, it was a map of his future crimes. I wasn't just showing what he did, I was showing what he was about to do. The guests weren't laughing anymore. They were leaning in, horrified by the cold, calculated greed displayed on the screen. Justin's hand gripped his glass so hard I thought it might shatter right then and there. The groom, Julian, who was Justin's own nephew and protege, stood up and looked at the screen. He looked at his uncle, then back at the documents. Uncle Justin, that's my father's signature on those permits. But my father was in the hospital that day. He died in that Bayside collapse because he went in to check the structural integrity himself. Julian's voice was shaking. He had worshipped Justin, believing he was a mentor who cared about family and honor. Seeing his father's forged signature on the very documents that led to his death was the final straw. The betrayal was deep and personal. Chloe looked at Julian, then at me, her eyes filling with tears. The perfect family she thought she was joining was actually a den of thieves and murderers. I could see the realization hitting Julian like a physical blow. He wasn't just a witness, He was a victim. Justin tried to put a hand on Julian's shoulder, but Julian flinched away as if he had been burned. The rift was open, and there was no way Justin could close it now. The foundation of his family loyalty was gone. Justin leaned in toward me, whispering so only I could hear over the growing noise of the crowd. "You think this matters? You think a few slides change who I am in this city? I own the DA, I own the inspectors, I own the very ground you're standing on. You were just a girl with a grudge, and tomorrow, you'll be in a psych ward where you belong." He signaled for two large security guards who had been hovering near the doors. They began walking toward me, their expressions cold and professional. Justin thought he could still bully his way out of this. He thought physical force could silence the digital truth. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I knew something he didn't. I knew that power only works when people are afraid, and I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I had spent years in the shadows, learning every corner of his empire, and I knew exactly where the exits were. He was trying to play a game of checkers while I was finishing a game of chess. The security guards were close now, but they were about to have a much bigger problem than one unstable woman. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom didn't just open, they were thrown wide with a loud bang that stopped the security guards in their tracks. "Special Agent Finn." A voice rang out, authoritative and loud. My cousin, Simon, who Justin thought was just a low-level clerk in a boring government office in D.C., walked in with 12 men in suits behind him. They were all wearing windbreakers, with FBI printed in bold yellow letters on the back. The room went dead silent. Simon didn't look like the quiet, nerdy cousin Justin had mocked at Thanksgiving. He looked like a man on a mission. "Federal warrant," he announced, holding up a badge and a stack of papers. The guests scrambled to get out of the way as the agents flooded the room. Justin's face turned a strange shade of purple. He looked from Simon to me, his mouth hanging open. He had underestimated our entire family. He thought we were weak and broken, but we were just waiting for the right moment to strike back. The law had finally arrived at the party, and they weren't there for the cake. Justin was mid-sip of a fresh glass of champagne when the lead agent placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Justin Bonling, we have a warrant for your arrest regarding racketeering, grand larceny, and the 2016 Bayside homicide investigation," the agent said. The glass slipped from Justin's hand, hitting the white marble floor and shattering into 1,000 pieces. The sound of the breaking glass was the only noise in the room for a long moment. It was the sound of an empire ending. In front of the city's most powerful elites, the king of construction was forced to turn around and place his hands behind his back. The clicks of the handcuffs were sharp and final. The cameras that were supposed to film the wedding of the year were now capturing the fall of a criminal. The videographer, sensing a viral moment, didn't turn his camera off. He kept it rolling, capturing every second of Justin's public humiliation. This was the justice the victims had waited for, and it was happening in the most public way possible. Justin looked like a trapped animal, his eyes darting around the room for an escape that wasn't there. Chloe stood up, her long lace veil trailing behind her like a ghost. She walked slowly toward Justin, her face a mask of cold fury. She didn't look like a blushing bride anymore. She looked like a woman who had finally woken up from a long, bad dream. She reached up and unhooked the 100,000 diamond necklace Justin had given her as a welcome to the family gift. She held it for a second, then dropped it right into the puddle of spilled champagne and broken glass at his feet. "Miley told me you were a snake. I just didn't want to believe her because I wanted a father so badly," she said, her voice cracking but strong. "I'm done believing your lies, Justin. You're not a builder. You're a destroyer." She turned her back on him and walked toward me. I opened my arms, and she fell into them, sobbing quietly. The guests watched in stunned silence. This wasn't just a legal arrest, it was a moral eviction. Justin had lost the one thing he actually cared about, his image as a beloved patriarch. He looked at us, and for the first time I saw actual fear in his eyes. As the agents began to lead him out toward the waiting cars, Justin stopped and looked back at me with pure, unadulterated venom. "You've destroyed your sister's life, Miley. Do you see this? No more money, no more Bonling name. You're all broke and alone. You think you won? You just sent your own family into the gutter." He screamed it so loudly that the people outside in the lobby could probably hear him. He thought that by taking away the money, he was taking away our worth. He truly believed that without his stolen wealth, we were nothing. He thought this was his final win, a scorched earth policy that would leave us picking through the ruins. But I just looked at him and felt nothing but pity. He didn't understand that we had been living in the gutter for years while he sat in his penthouse. We were used to the struggle. We were used to the truth. And unlike him, we didn't need a golden cage to feel like we existed. I watched them pull him away, his screams fading as the heavy doors closed behind him once again. I walked up to the microphone that Justin had just vacated. The room was buzzing now, people talking over each other in a frenzy of gossip and shock. I tapped the mic, and the noise died down. "The Bonling name is gone," I told the room, my voice echoing through the massive ballroom. "But the Finn Foundation is officially back, because while Justin was busy stealing from his projects and hiding money in the shadows, I was busy documenting every single penny he took." I signaled to the AV tech one last time. A final slide appeared on the screen. It wasn't a crime scene or an email. It was a bank transfer receipt. $40 million, I announced. The stolen pension funds from the Bayside workers and the recovery funds for the families. I found where he hid them in a trust he forgot about years ago. It's been recovered and frozen for the victims. The room erupted, but it wasn't into cheers. It was a stunned, reverent silence. This wasn't just revenge. This was restoration. I hadn't just broken a man, I had fixed a wrong that had haunted our city for a decade. I thought that was the end. I thought I could finally take a breath and help Chloe out of her dress and into a new life. But as the FBI agents were clearing out the last of Justin's files from his private office in the hotel, Simon ran back into the ballroom. His face was pale, and he was holding a blue folder I had never seen before. "Miley, we have a major problem," he whispered, pulling me aside. "The offshore accounts, they aren't just in Justin's name. I just found the 2016 Bayside documents in the secondary safe." He opened the folder and showed me a signature at the bottom of a crucial safety bypass. My heart stopped. It was my father's signature. But my father had died in 2014. I stared at the ink, my mind racing. How could a dead man sign a document 2 years after he was buried? I felt a new kind of coldness wash over me. The rabbit hole was much deeper than I had realized. Justin hadn't just been a thief. He had been a ghost maker. He was using our father's legacy to shield his most dangerous crimes. "He didn't just kill him, Simon," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical weight. "He stole his identity." I looked at the signatures again. They were perfect. Justin must have had a stamp or a professional forger working for him for years. He had been using my father's reputation for safety and integrity to sign off on buildings that he knew were dangerous. If Bayside Towers collapsed, the paperwork said it was my father's fault. Justin was protecting himself by framing a man who couldn't defend himself from the grave. This was why he had pushed me so hard to give up my engineering license. He knew that if I looked too closely at the technical filings, I would see my father's handwriting on projects he never touched. The layers of betrayal were dizzying. I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't just about money or ego anymore. This was about a daughter clearing her father's name from a crime he was framed for while he was already gone. I knew I couldn't stop now. The arrest was just the beginning of the real fight. We had to find the physical evidence of the forgery. I realized that if my father's name was being used, Justin must have had access to something very personal of my father's, something he could use to prove intent if he ever got caught. I remembered the wedding gift Justin had given Chloe earlier that morning. It was a vintage 1965 Jaguar, the same model our father used to talk about wanting to restore one day. Justin had made a big show of saying it was a piece of her father's dream. At the time, it seemed like a sweet, sentimental gesture. Now, it felt like a taunt. I grabbed Chloe's hand and told her we had to go to the valet stand immediately. We ran through the lobby, leaving the confused guests behind. The car was sitting under the porte-cochere, its chrome gleaming under the streetlights. I didn't care about the paint job. I started tearing at the interior, looking for anything hidden. Chloe watched me, confused and scared. "Miley, what are you doing? It's just a car," she cried. But I knew Justin. Everything he did had a double meaning. He wouldn't give a gift that didn't also serve as a hiding place. I reached into the glove box and felt a small catch at the back. I pulled hard, and a hidden compartment clicked open. Inside was a thick, leather-bound logbook. I opened it and felt the air leave my lungs. It was what I called the Black Blueprint. It was a handwritten diary of every bribe Justin had paid over the last 20 years. It listed names of judges, city council members, and inspectors. It also contained the original practice sheets where he had spent hours perfecting my father's signature. He had kept it as insurance. If any of his partners ever turned on him, he could bring the whole city down with him. He had kept the Black Blueprint in the one place no one would ever look, a gift to the daughter of the man he had framed. It was the ultimate display of his arrogance. He thought he was so smart that he could hide his darkest secrets in plain sight, and we would thank him for the gift. I held the book to my chest, feeling the power of it. This wasn't just a ledger, it was a wrecking ball. I handed the logbook to Simon, who had followed us out. He looked through the pages, his eyes widening with every flip. "This is it, Miley. This is the entire network. This goes all the way to the governor's office," he said, his voice hushed with awe. Just as he said that, a black SUV pulled up fast, and Justin's lawyer, a shark named Thorne, stepped out. He saw the book in Simon's hand and stopped dead. He knew exactly what was in that leather cover. He tried to play it cool, but I could see the panic in his eyes. "That car and its contents are private property, Miley. Give it back, and we can talk about a settlement that will make you and your sister very, very comfortable for the rest of your lives," he said, his voice oily and manipulative. I just looked at him and smiled. It was the same smile Justin had used on me for years. "The time for settlements is over, Thorne. We're moving into the demolition phase now." I watched him realize that his meal ticket was gone, and he was likely next on the FBI's list. The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, news cameras, and legal filings. The Black Blueprint caused a total collapse of the local government. 7 high-ranking officials were forced to resign, and 3 more were indicted within the first month. The story of the wedding whistleblower was everywhere. But the most important part for me was the forensic report on the signatures. The FBI confirmed that every single document signed in my father's name after 2014 was a forgery. A public statement was issued, clearing Finn Engineering of any wrongdoing in the Bayside Towers collapse. I sat in my small apartment, reading the headline over and over. "Late engineer exonerated in corporate fraud case." For the first time in 10 years, I felt like I could breathe without a weight on my chest. Chloe moved in with me, and we spent our nights talking about the future, not the past. We were broke, as Justin had predicted, but we had never felt richer. We had our name back, and we had each other. The hollow ground we had been living on was finally being filled with something solid. I decided to use the last of my savings to rent a small office space in the old industrial district. It wasn't much, just a single room with a leaky ceiling, but it was mine. I hung a new sign on the door: Vance and Finn Forensic Engineering. Chloe was the CFO, using her business degree to manage the tiny amount of money we had left. Our first client was a group of families from the Bayside collapse who wanted to sue the city for negligence. We took the case pro bono. I spent my days in the mud and the dust, inspecting old buildings and making sure they were safe for the people living in them. It was hard work, and the pay was non-existent at first, but every time I signed my own name to a safety report, I felt a surge of pride. I wasn't just Miley the failure anymore. I was Miley Finn, the woman who built things to last. Justin was still in jail, awaiting trial, and his empire was being sold off piece by piece to pay back the people he had robbed. Every time a Bonling sign came down from a building, the city felt a little lighter. The real climax came during Justin's sentencing hearing. He looked older, his expensive suit replaced by an orange jumpsuit that didn't fit his ego. He tried to make one last speech about how he was a builder of worlds, and that the city would crumble without him. The judge didn't even look at him. She looked at me and asked if I had anything to say. I stood up and walked to the podium. I didn't bring any notes. I didn't need them. You called me a failure at the wedding, Justin, I said, my voice echoing in the courtroom. But a building is only as strong as its foundation. You built your life on lies, greed, and the bodies of good men. I built my life on the truth, even when it was painful. And today I'm still standing and you're just a pile of rubble. The judge sentenced him to 30 years without the possibility of parole. As they let him out, he didn't look back. He knew there was nothing left to look back at. His legacy was a hole in the ground, and I was the one who had filled it. 6 months later, the Finn Foundation was thriving. We had received a massive grant from the state to oversee the retrofitting of all of Justin's old buildings. We were making sure that the people who lived in those luxury towers were actually safe. Chloe and I went back to the Pierre Hotel for a charity gala, not as guests of a billionaire, but as the sponsors of the event. We walked through those same oak doors, but this time, the whispers were different. People weren't talking about my breakdown. They were talking about our courage. We stood at the same head table where Justin had tried to humiliate me. I raised my glass, this time filled with sparkling cider, and looked at my sister. She was smiling, a real bright smile that reached her eyes. She had recently started dating Julian again, who had also cleared his own father's name and was working with us to fix the family legacy. We weren't just survivors. We were architects of a new kind of world. A world where the truth didn't just come out, it stayed out. As the sun set over the city, I looked out at the skyline I had helped save. I thought about that first chapter, the glass shattering on the marble floor, and the mock pity in Justin's voice. They called what I did revenge in the newspapers and on the internet. They loved the drama of the FBI interrupting the toast. But as I stood there with my sister, I knew that wasn't the right word for it. I didn't do it to be mean, and I didn't do it to get rich. I did it to restore what had been broken. They called it revenge, I whispered to the wind. I called it restoration. Because foundations don't lie. If you build something with honesty and heart, it can weather any storm. But if you build it on hollow ground, it will always eventually come crashing down. I took a sip of my drink and turned back to the room, ready to keep building. The cracks were gone, the structure was sound, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I stood. And the ground beneath my feet was finally perfectly solid. If you found out your perfect family legacy was built on a lie, would you burn it all down to find the truth like Miley? Or would you keep the peace to protect your family's comfort? What would you have done in her shoes? If you enjoyed this deep dive into corporate revenge and structural justice, don't let the story end here. Subscribe to the channel for more hyper-realistic, high-stakes revenge stories. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a ticking clock climax. Like this video if you think Justin Bonling got exactly what he deserved.